Hello, my name is Darren Thomas and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this video, we're going to look at different types of conflict and how you can deal with these in your classroom. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn. So you can see here that the first four bullets are going to be dealing with different types of conflict. Affective, cognitive, behavioral, and of course, goal-oriented conflict. And then the last section there is going to deal with the scope of conflict. So let's take a look at affective. When we're talking about affective conflict, we're talking about a battle of emotions. So people's feelings are hurt, they're sensitive, they're angry, they're sad, whatever. There's a lot of things moving within the person in terms of their emotions. And so as a teacher, when students are having emotional conflict, or even when you're having emotional or affective conflict with the student, you want to try to calm things down and try to allow reason to prevail. If that's not always possible, you want to try to separate the students. Generally, it's much more difficult for a teacher to separate themselves from a student. The student has to be in the classroom. So perhaps the student may need to leave the classroom, at least for a few moments while you try to collect yourself, or you just have to find another way to deal with it. Another thing that I want to mention about emotional conflict is that a teacher really has to strive to try to maintain control of their emotions in the classroom, because if students know that they can easily get into affective or emotional conflict with you, they will do that on a consistent basis to watch you become upset and flustered or whatever and express your emotions in a way that they consider appropriate for them but inappropriate for you to do as a teacher. So this is something you have to be very, very careful with when you're in the classroom, that when you have affective conflict with students, you're able to maintain your cool. And that when students are having affective conflict with each other, you're able to diffuse the situation as much as possible. Another type of conflict is cognitive. And the best way to describe this is like a conflict of opinions. Two people see things a different way and they're both trying to push their way of doing things. Now, this form of conflict, based on my experience, is not as common. People tend to be mostly based on emotional or affective conflict. Thinking and understanding and thought is not as common as it used to be in the days past. Humans are primarily emotionally based first, and sometimes they will use their reasoning and their cognitive skills as a backup plan. And so this is not going to be as much of a problem. However, what often happens is that a conflict will begin cognitive. In other words, two people have a disagreement, and then the emotional attacks will shift the conflict from cognitive to an affective or emotional one. So this is what often happens as well. And you need to, again, make sure you maintain your skills for diffusing affective conflict, because that's probably where a lot of conflict ends up at. The next one is behavioral. And so this involves some sort of actions that offend or hurt someone else. So they could be physical, or they could be some sort of a passive aggressive, snide comments or whatever. But basically what's happening is that somebody does something that causes conflict or a disagreement with someone else. And again, maybe you're seeing how these different types are really just kind of overlapping ideas, where you can do something that leads to affective conflict, or you could do something that someone disagrees with, but it starts out as a cognitive conflict, but the catalyst for that was some sort of behavior or action. But again, in all these situations, of course, with behavioral, if you can get the behavior to stop, that would obviously be the best way to deal with this. And of course, there's all kind of different tricks in psychology related to behaviorism to try to extinguish particular behaviors, or if you believe in some other school of thought when it comes to psychology. Lastly, I believe we have goal conflict, and this is where people have competing interests, and it's literally a fight for supremacy. So the difference between goal and perhaps cognitive is that cognitive is kind of like a battle of the minds, whereas goal-oriented is like you're trying to achieve something and someone or something is in your way. And so you're going to find a way to push it aside. And again, this is kind of like a fight for supremacy. You want to be number one. You want to achieve whatever it is that you have set your mind on, and you don't want anything to get in your way. So of course, if the origins of the conflict can be a goal, this can, of course, lead to the other types of conflicts. So you have a goal, you might, attack someone emotionally, and so it switches to affective conflict, or you might pursue a particular behavior to achieve what you want, and of course that's going to lead to behavioral conflict. All these things can manifest themselves inside the classroom when two students are trying to achieve something. And of course, as a teacher, you can also have goal conflict with your students in that you're trying to, of course, teach a certain amount of content, trying to complete particular activities in the classroom, and there are students in there who have other goals that they would like to achieve, such as talking, being off task, etc. So again, you would have to, of course, rely on your tools in terms of being able to deal with, emotions, and also the various tools related to like behavioral, extinguishing behaviors, reinforcement, etc., in order to try to address goal conflict. And something else that we have to keep in mind, and that is the scope of the conflict. And so all these terms down here are basically three terms: personal, group, and organization. And then in front of them is either intra or inter. So intra means within. So it could be intrapersonal. It's like a conflict within the person, thoughts or ideals, cognitive dissonance, if you will. Or it can also be interpersonal. That's like between people. And so you can have conflict within an individual or between people. That can happen. You can have conflicts within a group. So within the group, they're fighting and arguing over something. Happens all the time in the classroom. Or it could be intergroup, between groups, boys versus girls, or, 5th grade versus 6th grade, however you want to see it. And of course, you can also have conflict within an organization, inter-organizational, or between organizations, inter-organizational. And so conflict can manifest itself at these different levels. And so you need to be aware of the types of conflict as well as the scope of the conflict, as that will affect how you try to manage it. All right, so let me see if I can summarize this video. In this particular video, we looked at the types of conflict as well as the scope. And so for types of conflict, you have affective, that's emotional; cognitive, dealing with the mind; behavioral, certain actions are causing the disagreement; and goal, a desire to, of course, achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. And in addition to that, you also must be aware of the scope of the conflict, whether it's at the personal, the group, or the organizational level. So I want to thank you so much for watching. My name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Again, thank you for watching and take care.